Hello, good day. How are you today? You're good, right? Okay, so are you ready for today's lesson? You are? That is good. So today in agricultural science, we are going to be learning about classification of weeds. Okay? Our topic for today in agricultural science is on classification of weeds. Okay? Classification of weeds is like organizing them into groups based on certain characteristics. It helps us understand different types of weeds better. Remember, weeds are unwanted plants that can grow in gardens, fields, and other places where we don't want them. We can classify weeds in different ways. We can group them based on where they grow, which is their habitat, how long they live, their lifespan, or what their leaves look like, which is the shape of their leaves. Okay, so first we are going to be looking at classification based on habitat. Okay, classification based on habitat. We have the aquatic weeds. Weeds that grow in or near water, like lakes and ponds. Some common examples of aquatic weeds include water lilies and duckweed. These plants can sometimes grow very quickly and cover the water surface, which can be a problem for the environment and for activities like fishing. Okay, so the aquatic weeds are plants that grow in or near water. They can be found in places like ponds, lakes, rivers. These weeds are adapted to living in water and often have these special features like long thin stems and leaves that float on the surface of the water. Next we have the terrestrial weeds. Weeds that grow on land, in fields and gardens. Some common examples of the terrestrial weeds include dandelions, crabgrass, and thistles. These plants often compete with the plants we want to grow, like flowers, grains, or vegetables. Terrestrial weeds can be a problem because they can take up space, water, nutrients that the desired plants need to grow. So the terrestrial weeds are plants that grow on land. And these plants often compete with the plants we want to grow. Terrestrial weeds are often recognized by their ability to grow almost anywhere, like the lawns, gardens, and even between cracks in the sidewalks. Third, we have weeds of disturbed areas. Weeds that like places with disturbed soils, like roadsides. Common examples of these weeds include plants like bindweed, pigweed, and chickweed. So, weeds of disturbed areas are plants that thrive in places where the soil and land have been disrupted or changed by human activities. These areas might include construction sites, roadsides, and places where the ground has been dug up or disturbed. So these are the classification based on habitat. Remember, the habitat is where those weeds grow. We have the aquatic weeds. They grow in or near water. the terrestrial weeds. There are weeds that grow on land, in fields and gardens. Then we have weeds of disturbed areas. There are weeds that thrive in places where the soil and land have been disrupted. So next, we are going to be looking at classification based on lifespan. Classification based on lifespan is how long these weeds live. Okay, how long they live. One, we have annual weeds, weeds that complete their life cycle in just 1 year. Some common examples of annual weeds include plants like common persillon and pigweed. Annual weeds are plants that complete their entire life cycle in just 1 year, which is relatively short. The annual weeds start as seeds, grow into small plants, mature, produce seeds, and then die, all within one growing season. The annual weeds, you might find them growing in gardens, farm fields, or even in sidewalk crops. Okay. Two, we have biennial weeds, weeds that live for 2 years, growing leaves in the first year and flowering in the second. Common examples of biennial weeds include plants like melon, common thistle, and garlic mustard. For the biennial weeds, they live for 2 years, unlike the annual weeds that complete their life cycle in 1 year. The biennial weeds take 2 years to grow through their entire life cycle. Okay, these plants grow as small rosettes in the first year, but they don't produce flowers or seeds. In the second year, they grow taller, produce flowers, produce seed, and then die. You can find the biennial weeds in fields and sometimes along roadsides. Third, we have perennial weeds, weeds that come back year after year. Common examples of perennial weeds include dandelions and bindweed. Perennial weeds are like the long distance runners of the plant world. These are plants that live for many years and they keep coming back year after year. Unlike annual and biennial weeds that complete their life cycle in just 1 or 2 years, perennial weeds have a more extended life. They have strong roots system or underground structures that allow them to survive through different seasons. You can find them in gardens, fields, where they keep coming back even if you remove them. These are the classification based on lifespan, how long the weeds live. We have the annual leaves, weeds, they complete their life cycle in just 1 year. The biennial weeds, they live for 2 years. The perennial weeds, they come back year after year. They have an extended life. Okay, so now we are going to be looking at classification based on shape of leaves. Remember, classification based on shape of leaves is how their leaves look like. Okay, what their leaves look like. We have the broadleaf weeds, weeds with wide, flat leaves, often found in gardens. Common examples of broadleaf weeds include dandelions, broadleaf plantain, and clover. So broadleaf weeds are a group of plants that are easy to identify because of their wide, flat leaves. These leaves are not thin and grass-like. Instead, they are broad and often have distinct shapes. They usually stand out because their leaves look quite different from the grasses around them. Then we have grassy weeds, weeds that look like grass with narrow leaves which can be tricky to spot. Common examples of grassy weeds include crabgrass, quackgrass, and Bermuda grass. So grassy weeds are a group of plants that look a lot like grass with narrow leaves. These are the classification based on shape of weeds, the broadleaf weeds and the grassy weeds. Okay, remember today's topic is classification of weeds, and we have talked about three classifications. We talked about classification based on habitats, which is where the weeds live. We mentioned where they live and the different types of weeds that live in the different habitats, right? Then we also talked about classification based on lifespan, which is how long they live, how long these weeds live. Then we talked about classification based on shape of leaves, what their shapes look like, right? So we now know how to classify weeds, right? Good. So we understood today's lesson on classification of weeds. That's good. So now we are going to be looking at our assignment. I'm sure we are going to be able to do our assignment, right? Good.